In this video, I'm going to go over common types of logical fallacies. So first, what is a fallacy? This definition comes from the Language of Composition, page 90, so your textbook. And it says, a more practical definition of a fallacy might be a failure to make a logical connection between the claim and the evidence used to support the claim. So when we talk about logical fallacies, we're really talking about what sort of evidence is being used to back up somebody's claim. And this is relevant for us for when we write a straight up argument essay, so our Q3. And it's also when we write a synthesis essay, because remember, the only difference between an argument essay and a synthesis essay is a synthesis essay, you get to use sources given to you. An argument essay, all of your evidence has to come from your brain. So we want to make sure that as we're crafting arguments, we're trying to avoid logical fallacies. And this also helps us when we are like debating with somebody, trying to pinpoint where their logic might be faulty. There are three categories of logical fallacies. So fallacies of relevance, fallacies of accuracy, and fallacies of insufficiency. So these are the three broad categories that fallacies will fall into. So they're either related to, are they relevant, how relevant the evidence is, how accurate the evidence is, or is the evidence insufficient? Fallacies of relevance. The first major one is called the bandwagon fallacy. This is where a speaker argues that the audience must accept or reject their argument because everyone else accepts or rejects it. This is where the phrase comes from, like jumping on the bandwagon, like everybody else is doing it, so that's why you should too. This is kind of a silly example, but from Mean Girls, right? I saw Katie Heron wearing army pants and flip-flops, so I bought army pants and flip-flops. Everybody else is doing it, so you should too. That's a bandwagon fallacy. A red herring is where the speaker skips to a new and completely irrelevant topic in order to avoid what's being discussed. So the key with the red herring is somebody pushes the argument to something that's not related at all. So an example of this, when your mom gets the phone bill and you've gone over your limit, is that still a thing anymore? I don't know. You begin talking to her about how hard your math class is and how well you did on a test that day. So you're changing the subject completely. That's a red herring. This is also found in literature. So red herrings in literature are maybe events or information that's dropped by the author to sort of confuse the reader, to pull the reader away, and make them believe something that's kind of not true. So the key with a red herring is it's irrelevant to the topic at hand. Ad hominem. This is also called like an attack on the person. So it's a diversionary tactic, switching the argument from the issue to the character of the speaker. This happens all the time in politics. Politicians love ad hominem fallacies. They do it all the time. It's a specific type of red herring. So an example, I wouldn't vote for Higgins because he left his wife and 3 kids to run off with his secretary. Does that make Higgins a trash person? Yes, probably. Does that have anything to do with, his willingness or, his aptitude for an elected office? Perhaps. But to use that as the sole reason for your argument would be an ad hominem fallacy. You're attacking the character of a person instead of the issue at hand. A faulty analogy. So this is where you compare two things based on superficial similarities, and you're completely ignoring the ways that they're absolutely not similar. So people are like dogs. They respond best to clear discipline. So, yes, dogs and people need discipline. However, the differences between a human being and a canine are numerous. And so this argument is ignoring all the ways that a human and a canine are not similar. And this is a faulty analogy. Next are fallacies of accuracy. So fallacies that deal with how accurate something is. First one is an appeal to a false authority. So this is where a speaker uses a quote unquote authority as evidence in their argument when the authority is not really an authority for like the facts of the argument. Think about all the like ads and commercials or like on social media where celebrities will endorse different health products or things like that. Advertisers pay celebrities to do that because they're using them as a quote unquote authority on the topic when really like that person is just an actor. They are not a dietitian. They don't know anything, scientific about weight loss or whatever it is that they're trying to sell. So that would be an example of an appeal to false authority. A straw man fallacy. This is where an attack on a view similar but not the same as one your opponent holds. So this is where in your mind you need to separate it from a red herring. So a red herring has to do with something completely irrelevant to the subject. A straw man will be slightly related to the subject, but it's set up as like a weaker version of the topic at hand, and it's like easier for somebody to argue against. And I added this little tidbit in here because I thought it was interesting. The name probably derives from an old game in which a straw man was set up to divert attention from the real target that contestants were supposed to knock down. So again, whatever diversionary tactic is set up will be similar to the topic at hand, at least tangentially. However, a red herring is completely irrelevant. I got this out of a book, and it had more information on here. We're going to unpack a straw man in class, but moving an argument from a proposed ban on soft drinks to global warming. So, banning soft drinks and like the use of, I'm drawing a blank here. The use of like crude oil and stuff like that and like the environmental impact. If somebody moved that discussion to global warming, it's somewhat related to the topic, but it's clearly not the topic at hand. And then a false dilemma, either or fallacy. This is also called a false dichotomy, where the speaker presents two extreme options and says that these are the only two options. So USA, love it or leave it. And then another one, if we don't end our dependence on oil, we will destroy our children's future. So with those, it's pretty clear to see there's these two extreme options, and whoever is arguing this is trying to force you one way or the other. But clearly there are more than just two options in life. This one has a funny name, but hang with me. So post hoc, ergo, propter hoc. And it means after this, therefore, because of this. This is where the speaker falsely argues that one thing was caused by another based largely on chronology. However, simply because one thing comes after something else, it doesn't mean that it was caused by it. So after this, therefore, because of this. Example, the rooster crows every morning at 5:30 and seeing the sun rise immediately after decides that his crowing has caused the sun to rise. So just because the sun rises after the rooster crows, it doesn't mean that the rooster crowing causes the sun to rise. So again, post hoc, ergo, propter hoc. Slippery slope. This is similar to the post hoc fallacy, and it's where the speaker falsely assumes that one thing must lead to another. And a lot of times people use slippery slope, and it's kind of like a domino effect, where they'll be like, if this happens, then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and like our world is going to be destroyed. So an example, the Connecticut law allowing 16-year-olds and their parents to divorce each other will mean the death of the family. So again, it goes from if this happens, then domino effect, this really extreme thing is going to happen. That's a slippery slope fallacy. And then equivocation. So this is where a writer or speaker intentionally misleads the audience by using a word with a double or ambiguous meaning. So a lot of times, words are used that don't necessarily have a very concrete definition. So words like in our example, justice or freedom or hope or love, those things can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so when a speaker is using a kind of ambiguous word, they're equivocating. So we will bring our enemies to justice, or we will bring justice to them. This came out of your textbook, and in your textbook, it explained that in the first instance, justice kind of means, right, it's more straightforward, like bringing them to some like they have to pay for what they've done, they have to be held accountable, or we will bring justice to them. In the second use of the word justice, it's almost used like vengeance, or like to get revenge on them. And lastly, fallacies of insufficiency. We have a hasty generalization. This is where there's not enough evidence to support a particular conclusion. This is really easy to do, right? How do you know that you have enough evidence to not kind of fall into a hasty generalization? This is where that line of reasoning comes in, and why it's important you have to move your audience from point A to point B to point C. An example of a hasty generalization would be the driver who cut me off was an old lady, so old people shouldn't be allowed to drive. That is a hasty generalization based on the evidence at hand. You need more evidence, a wider variety of evidence, in order to prove that claim. And lastly, we have begging the question or circular reasoning. So this is repeating the claim as a way to provide evidence resulting in no evidence at all. People say, like, the reason these clubs are in such high demand is that everyone wants to get in them. Or, another example could be like, I don't like soccer because it's one of my least favorite sports. You're not really giving any reasons why. You're just circling back to your main claim that you don't like it. So one thing to keep in mind with logical fallacies is it's pretty hard to spot and like name logical fallacies, like quote unquote, out in the wild. It's difficult to pinpoint, hey, this person is using a straw man, or this person is using a hasty generalization. We will practice it, but the important thing is that you are able to identify when someone's logic is faulty. So even if you can't tag the name on it right yet, being able to say there is a logical fallacy happening here, and maybe you can even say, I think it deals with relevance, or I think it deals with insufficiency. That's going to be a step in the right direction. So this was just an overview. We will practice this in class, and make sure you check out, I've posted this PowerPoint on our class website for you as well.